be here today. I remember a year ago when we were talking about how we just were starting the process of getting Darwin together and making the first steps. And it's been quite a year. Sometimes some people ask me, like, what percentage of your FTE do you dedicate to Darwin? And I say somewhere between 120 and 140%. But it's been a fantastic collaboration, and I also want to start by thanking Andre and the team at the EMA. We have a very packed agenda for the rest of the session, so I'm not going to entertain you for too long. We're going to start by thanking not only Peter and Katia who are going to be here today, but also the team of subcontractors who work with us to deliver all the work that we're doing, starting, of course, with Erasmus, but then the subcontractors from Oxford, Synapse, IQVIA, The Hive, and Odysseus. Hopefully, all of them around here, so thank you very much for all your work. I'm going to start inviting Ed to talk for 10 minutes, and it's going to be 10 minutes, I'm going to control that, about how we do development in Darwin. Thank you so much, Ed.
Great, thanks Danny, and happy to be here to talk about some of the development work we've been doing in Darwin. So just a standard disclosure. So what I'll talk about is two things really. So first I'm just going to give an overview of the activities we've been doing really over the last year, and then just talk a bit more about some specific packages that we've developed. So I think we've had lots of nice interactions during the poster session and the software demos, showing some of what we've built, and I'll try and kind of put it all into context now. So this is a catalogue of standard data analyses that we've kind of come up with in Darwin, and this is the menu of studies that we do. And this is kind of the cornerstone of what we're developing our tools against. So the tools we're making in Darwin are to deliver this catalogue of studies to the EMA. And here I'm just showing the two groups of studies. So we've got the off-the-shelf studies on the one hand, and we've already performed some of them, and we've got lots and lots more coming up in the next few years, and also these complex studies. So just in terms of off-the-shelf, we have, it varies from patient-level characterization to DUS analyses, and then more population-level studies looking at incidence, prevalence, and so on. And then we've also got this other side of complex studies, so whether this is self-controlled case series, so SCCS, it could be cohort population-level estimation, but also RMM effectiveness type studies. So lots of complex studies we might be asked to do as well. So this is kind of the foundation of what we're aiming to do, is deliver this catalogue. And in the development pillar, what we're working on is building tools to help the other pillars to provide these studies successfully. And really our primary focus over the last year has been building our packages that help perform standard data analyses, especially these off-the-shelf studies that we've heard of. Not only do we have the advantage of having a catalogue to aim towards, we also have a large group of users that we personally know. They sit by our side, and they quickly complain and give useful feedback when things don't work, when things are clumsy, when things are difficult to use. And that's really like how we've been able to build so many of these R packages that you've seen today. So it's really based on that user involvement and the feedback from those people trying to use what we've made and us trying to improve it. That's what allowed us to have the things that we've been showing downstairs and now. And really these users in Darwin are quite a specific group of people. They're generally epidemiologists and data scientists. They're interacting with the R packages we've made to prepare analysis scripts such as to do incidence prevalence and things like this. And in general, they seem to value like flexibility and extensibility in tools. And that really helps us kind of try and deliver as many things from the catalogue as quickly as we can. And I just put some books that is maybe like the things you might see on their bookshelf, just to kind of indicate these are the users, the typical user that we're aiming for with what we've made. And I think like I show this in like all the presentations I do when I'm talking about building tools, and it's really about involving these people as co-developers in what we're making. Sometimes I think they're a bit surprised to find that we can't just hand them some shiny R package that does everything perfectly to start with. It's really like the collaboration between us and the other pillars to try and find a way that the tools we make are useful to those people and can help them get the studies done. And this is really about just getting their feedback as quickly as possible. And this can go to like quite extreme levels. So I'm just showing some GitHub issues, but this is kind of some of the interactions we have, which is maybe we've got some user interface for a package we're developing, and there's plenty of feedback on what we call the arguments, what options are needed, and so on. And it might go on and on and on, and this might be, yeah, just the names of the arguments. But it's that level of feedback also helps us try and make tools that are hopefully quite intuitive to the users. As well as getting the feedback on what we should make, we're also fortunate that many of these people can actually actively contribute to the packages we're making. So one thing people might have noticed downstairs is, well, it's almost exclusively R packages I've talked about so far, and if you look at the code, it's almost always R code. And one big benefit of this is the internals to the package are actually very familiar to lots of our users, and they can come along and make some nice contributions and help us quickly improve what we're building. So more and more GitHub issues I'm showing. That's been my life maybe for the last year. And we've also developed some packages to help us make packages. So this is work led by Martin here in Erasmus. So this is really our intention of trying to build a foundation of packages that are going to be sustainable to maintain and are going to last in the long term for the studies with the EMA. So we've got this package called Pair. And what this does, it's our reviewer too of the packages we're making, and it comes and generates a report looking at all the code we're writing and telling us, oh, here are some particular issues that if we're worried about a maintainable code base, these are the things to concentrate on improving over time. Not only do we do those kind of things, we also do a lot of work in terms of validating the software we're trying to make. So in this example, this was work led by Berta and Marty in using the packages we've developed to replicate some previous studies to make sure that we're getting consistent results. And what you can see here is that packages were producing consistent results with the previous study we were looking at there. Not only that, we have a couple of databases that are representative of the population, so we could compare the incidence of COVID-19, for example, that you get from the national statistics to what we can extract from the data. And you can see, except for the early part of the pandemic, after that, the incidence rates you could estimate on the real-world data were very consistent with what you get from the national statistics. More and more work. So we also look into the software performance. So here we try more and more to do benchmarking of the code we're writing, particularly across a network of databases and the different environments people are working on. So just seeing how long things take to run. So for example, we've got the CPRD ORM database here that's almost 40 million people, but then it goes all the way down to the IPSI database that had 2 million. And fortunately for them, it runs a lot quicker, but we do have much more data in ORM. And this is, you can see like the function of the performance is also very much based on the size of the data, but also the environments people are working in. So this helps us to know that when we get to the real studies, the packages will run in different environments and they'll run at an acceptable speed. So that's kind of how we're trying to go about building the things that we've been showing today. And then these are some of the R packages to mention that these are all available on CRAN. So people can, many people have seen them already, but many people, if you haven't seen them, you can go to CRAN, test them out on your OMOP and see how they work for you. So we've got two kind of workhorse packages. So we have CDM connector that Adam Black's been leading. And that's a really nice package that kind of abstracts a lot of the work with a database away from the user. So it will build a nice reference to the CDM, which you can then operate as if you were working with data in memory. We then have patient profiles package that Marty's been leading to kind of then abstract even more things away. So if you're calculating age and all these things and looking at intersections between cohorts, there's very simple functions to do that kind of work. That's kind of some of the underlying packages. We also have some packages to help us with phenotyping that complement what's already been developed in OHDSI. So we have, for example, the code list generator package. So if you want a code list for every ATC group or every drug ingredient, that can quickly go through the vocabularies and generate those. But you can also do a systematic search of code. So imagine you're looking for a definition of asthma, you can start here to get all the codes that could be asthma, and then do some kind of systematic review to work out which codes you really trust to be representing your phenotype of interest. Then we get onto the packages more specifically tied to the catalogue. So we have 2 packages related to drug utilization. So the drug utilization package that Mimi was showing downstairs, and that Marty has also been helping to lead, and also the drug exposure diagnostics package that Hare, based here, has been working on. So here we have a diagnostics package. Again, this complements like the existing OHDSI cohort diagnostics package, where this one's a bit more specific to look at the quality of drug data. And then once we started a study, we're happy with the quality of the drug exposure records we're going to use in that study, we can then go on to use a drug utilization package that will provide lots of the functionality to deliver the estimates that the EMA are interested in. As well as that, we've developed the incidence prevalence package. This is actually turning out to be widely used in lots of different types of studies. Here we've got functions like estimate period prevalence and estimate incidence, which I guess people can guess what they do. This package has lots of kind of options around how you generate your denominator cohort, and also then how you estimate your incidence and prevalence, where those options might vary depending on the study you're performing. And that's a very quick tour of what we've been working on for the last year.
Thank you, Ed. We're going to have a Q&A later. I'm going to invite Katia, who is leading study operations, to come to the stage. Before I do that, I just want to recognize the people involved in the Darwin Coordination Center who cannot be in the stage today, because we would need probably a much bigger table to accommodate for them. But I want to recognize the work of my colleagues at SIDIAP who have helped us submit I don't know, more than 100 deliverables, I think, and Maxime and the team who have been helping us with managing this network of data partners. And with that, Katia.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. So I'm going to give some explanation on how we work with regard to the study operations. This is my disclosure. This shows how we are organized around DARWIN EU. So we have the director, which is Peter Rijnbeek, and then we have the pillars, advisory boards, development pillar, which Ed explained, technology pillar, management pillar, and then operations, mainly dealing with the execution of the studies and then dealing with the network management. And I'm going to focus on the middle. Within Darwin, we are doing 4 types of studies, and you see all 4 types of studies here, and I'm not going to follow the order. I'm going to start with the off-the-shelf studies, and these are the studies for which we use a generic protocol. These are the studies that we hope we can do in a fast way. Typical studies would be studies looking into the prevalence, incidence, or characteristics of exposure. And as I said, we work with a general protocol to facilitate the conduct of these studies. Then we have complex studies. So these would be studies where we require development or customization of specific designs, protocols, or statistical analysis plans, and could be with extensive collection of data. And then we have the very complex studies. These are studies which cannot rely on electronic healthcare databases only, so for which we require complex methodological work, or where we would have prospective data collection. And then at the top, we have routine repeated analysis. So that would mean that the studies that we have done in the past would be repeated, for instance, next year after, so at a regular, in a regular phase. This shows the expected number of studies within DARWIN EU. So we have 5 years. So in 2022, we had the first year, phase 1, and then this was a planning where we had 2 off-the-shelf studies planned. We did 3, 1 complex study, and then routine repeated. Of course, at the start of the study, it's difficult to do routine repeated studies. In year 2, this is the planning, so 6 routine repeated, 6 off-the-shelf studies, and 4 complex studies. And you see that from next year on, the number of planned studies increases a lot. If you look at the planning for this year, because we are still in the setup phase, doing routine repeated analysis showed to be a little bit more difficult. So we are doing 14 off-the-shelf studies and 4 complex studies. How are we organized? So this shows the activities that we do within study operations. So at the top, we have study exploration. And in study exploration, that's mainly doing study feasibility. So the EMA has a specific request. They come with that study request to the Darwin Coordinating Center. And the first thing that we will do is check, do we have the data? And do we have the analytical pipeline? That's definitely important for off-the-shelf studies. We check whether we have the data using the Darwin portal. Information is collected, passed on to EMA, and then EMA evaluates and decides whether they're going to go ahead with the study or not. If they go ahead with the study, we move to the study initiation form. So what is going to happen? We work with work order forms with the data partners. We are going to create a study team that's going to be a principal investigator and data analyst at minimum, and might be extended for more complex studies. And we check whether there's any potential conflict of interest with the study team. Then we move to the study implementation, which is a very important phase where we are going to work on a study outline and the protocol. Protocol is sent to EMA for review. If it's okay, we are going to upload the protocol on the EU PAS register, which Andrea alluded on. Of course, we need IRB approval for some of the databases. We are going to organize a kickoff meeting with the whole team and the data partners. We will work on phenotyping, cohort diagnostics, working on the study package and do some test run. And if that passes, we move to study execution. Study execution would mean that data partners run the study package, that they do a quality check on their data, which is extremely important. Results will be uploaded to a digital research environment, and then results are reviewed by the principal investigator. And then we move to the last phase, which is a study dissemination, where we're going to generate a study report based on the NCEP template, passed on to EMA for review. If they are happy with the report, we're going to upload the report to the EU PAS register, going to draft a manuscript, and then do the study archiving. And what I showed at the right is extremely important. Of course, it's in close collaboration with EMA, with the data partners, and then within all people of the Darwin EU Coordinating Center. These are the studies that we conducted in year one. I'm not going to list them all because Andrea already alluded on them, but we did a disease epidemiology study, 2 drug utilization studies, and then a complex study, and the 2 of the studies will be discussed in more detail later on. For this year, these studies have been discussed by Andre as well. So we are going to have a drug utilization study on opioids, disease epidemiology study with treatment patterns for multiple myeloma, a complex study, the OHDSI use case, looking into coagulopathy, and then there's a drug utilization study and disease epidemiology study on treatment of pulmonary arterial hypertension. Another study planned on a drug utilization study looking into use of naloxone, and then another drug utilization study on use of erythromycin as prokinetic drug in children and in adults. We have had feasibility requests. So as of today, we have received 13 feasibility requests in year 2. So that means that the EMA has a specific question and comes back to us to check whether these studies are possible. 6 studies received green light, and I reflected on these studies in the previous slides. For 4 studies, EMA agreed on the feasibility assessment, but suggested to put it on hold for different reasons. For instance, lack of data or need of more recent data. And then 3 feasibility assessments, either we have just received them or are currently under review by EMA. With regard to the, so as I said, it's important to think about the next phases where we are going to increase the number of studies. Like for instance, for next year, we are planning to do more than 70 studies, and the number of studies is going to increase in year 4 and year 5. And in order to do that, it's important to be organized as much as possible. And I really want to thank, I'm repeating messages which have already passed on by other speakers, but I cannot say more how much I'm grateful for the collaboration, nice collaboration that we had with the data partners. And without them, we wouldn't have made it. And then also the nice collaboration with EMA, and also the excellent collaboration with people from the Darwin EU Coordinating Center. So thank you all.
following on with the thank you, I'll now take also a second to say thank you to the technology pillar who make all this work possible, and of course the data partners. And to represent them, we have Talita, who is one of our esteemed colleagues working at SIDIAP. Talita.
Thank you, Danny. Hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk a little bit about the experience of the SIDIAP database as data partner in DARWIN EU. I'm very happy to see all of you, and also a little bit terrified because I haven't given a presentation in public in a long time, so bear with me. So you've seen this already. Andre has showed this slide before, but I just wanted to show it to you again to highlight the role of data partners and data in DARWIN EU. So DARWIN EU is a federated network of data to generate reliable evidence from real-world healthcare data. So I think this is quite obvious, but it's okay, and I think it's good to say out loud that without healthcare data, we wouldn't be here today, right? So you've also seen this slide. So EDIAP Jordi-Go, we were selected to be one of the first databases to be onboarded in DARWIN EU during the phase 1 and the first year of DARWIN EU. So what is EDIAP? SIDIAP, there's a little bit of confusion, so I'm here to clarify that. So EDIAP Jordi-Go, it's a primary care research institute located in the beautiful city of Barcelona, and this is a photo from the view from our terrace, and you're all welcome to come visit sometime. And in 2010, EDIAP Jordi-Go, together with the Catalan Health Institute, created the SIDIAP database. So SIDIAP is the information system for research in primary care. It includes electronic health records from primary care linked to hospital discharge data for more than 8 million people, around 6 million people active in 2022. It has data available since 2006, and it's updated on a 6-monthly basis, and the mean follow-up time is around 15 and 16 years right now. SIDIAP includes around 75% of the population living in Catalonia, and this is shown to be representative of the overall population living in Catalonia in terms of geographic distribution, age, and sex. So what about our journey in OHDSI and OMOP? So our journey started in 2015 when we joined the IMI project called EMIF, and that was when for the first time we started to give it a try on the ETL and get our data mapped to the OMO common data model. But it wasn't until, I would say, 2019 when we got funding from another EMI project called Eden that we've heard a lot about today, when we actually had a final version of our ETL, and it was then when we started generating evidence. And also again in 2020 with the pandemic, we got more funding and a lot of support from Eden to get the data, the COVID-19 data mapped to the OMO common data model. And from then, since then, we've been able to generate a lot of evidence, both locally and in network studies. And here are just some few examples. And what has been our involvement as data partners in the DARWIN EU so far? So we've been selected to participate in the first 4 studies that Andre and Katia have already mentioned, and I won't repeat it again since both John and Albert are going to present in a minute the results of the drug utilization studies. But we've also been participating in many feasibility assessments, and we've already been invited to participate in 4 off-the-shelf and 1 complex studies this year. So hopefully more studies will come during this year. And now here I would like to talk for a minute about what have been the main challenges that we've faced as data partners in the DARWIN EU so far. And I mean, this is the experience of SIDIAP, but probably also some of this is shared with other data partners. So the first challenge has been time. So for approvals, for example, for IRB approvals, so SIDIAP database, it usually takes around 1.5 or 2 months to get IRB approvals. So now we are talking about running a study in a month, so obviously this won't work. I don't think we are there yet to have very quick approvals, but we are working internally to improve this process. There were challenges regarding the study execution, so because we were so late with the IRB approvals, we had to run to execute the studies, and at the same time, the pipelines were being developed at the same time that we were running executing studies, so there were some issues. You know, it wasn't just press a button and you got results, but you have to interact a lot with Ed and many others in the team. And then finally, there was almost no time for us to really dive into the results, review them before submitting it to the coordinating center because we had to rush and submit, right? So all these things, I think, are already improving a lot, but these were the main challenges that we had the first year related with time. Then there were some technical issues, some related to the pipelines, but also internal issues regarding, for example, our mapping. So SIDIAP is one of the databases that we've used a lot, and we've generated a lot of evidence. But even still, we find some problems with the mapping. So for example, in one study now, we've detected an issue with the mapping of doses and that we need to fix. So we identified that problem while executing this study. So, you know, these are all important challenges, but also an opportunity to improve our data quality, our data, right? Improve data quality. And funding is also an issue. So in the case of SIDIAP database, our research team, we have to pay for a data access fee for every study. And this data fee is higher than the amount that we're getting per study in Darwin. So that's something that we had to negotiate internally to decrease the fees so we could actually participate in the studies. And we'll see if, you know, in the future this will be sustainable for us to be involved in 10, 50, or we'll see how many studies we have per year. But there are also many, many opportunities and benefits for us to be data partners in Darwin. And here is a list of some that I would like to highlight. First, the collaborations with other data partners. You know, we are consolidating this collaboration with other data partners that we already worked in the past. The collaborations with the coordinating center, the collaboration with EMA. So we're very happy about that. Being part of the development of all these standardized analytical tools, this is also a great opportunity for us. Accelerate research, so I'm talking about, you know, accelerating the processes, the internal processes such as like IRB approvals and things like that. So this is very important for us. Having a broader public health impact than if we were performing studies locally or nationally. The training, so at the same time that we're performing these studies, our team is also getting ready to, you know, in the future probably lead studies as well. Improve data quality, I've mentioned that before, because we're detecting, is the opportunity to detect problems with mapping, with technical issues that we can solve. Is an opportunity to support regulatory decision-making, and also the visibility for the database is huge. More people get to know the database and want to use it for their own research. So just to sum up with some final remarks, there have been a few challenges while participating in DARWIN EU projects, but those are actually leading to opportunities, and I think the list of opportunities is endless. And just to name a few, there's an opportunity to improve our internal processes and speed up the process of research, an opportunity to participate in the development of all these standardized methodologies and analytics that will for sure shape the future of regulatory research. And there's an opportunity to contribute to the generation of real-world evidence to support regulatory decision-making. Sorry, I know probably I'm good with time. And finally, of course, we hope that being part of the DARWIN EU will be contributed to improve healthcare outcomes through data-driven research. And just, I couldn't finish this presentation without thanking the people who make all this possible. And as I said before, without data, we probably wouldn't be here, but also without the healthcare professionals and patients who provide the data, we wouldn't be here today either. So I would like to thank them. I also want to thank my group at the Real World Epidemiology Research Group at SIDIAP for all the support they are giving to make our participation in DARWIN EU possible. The SIDIAP team for maintaining our OMOP common data model. And finally, I would like to thank Eden for supporting with the resources for us to be there, to have an ETL, the OHDSI communities, all of you, for building the path for us to be here today, the DARWIN EU Coordinating Center for all the amazing work that you're doing, and finally, EMA for inviting SIDIAP to be, part of this adventure and for this initiative. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
I'm going to change slide very quickly because that's the city where I come from, and I live somewhere a little bit less sunny nowadays. It's very painful for me to see that picture. Yeah, it's wonderful, Talita. Thank you so much. I still remember when I recruited Talita to work when I was at SIDIAP, and we started the interview in English because I knew we wanted somebody who could come to a conference and speak like she's just done. We then moved to Spanish, and then I said, let's try if she also speaks Catalan, and we moved to Catalan, and then I didn't dare to try her in Portuguese because I'm sure she would have also joined me in that. But it's wonderful to see people, growing and like Talita is doing. Thank you so much. Next I'm going to invite two speakers who have been actually the guinea pigs who were given the task of leading the first DARWIN EU studies last December, and I'm going to start by inviting Albert Prats-Uribe to the stage. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to talk to you about the first drug utilization study we've done in Darwin. Disclosures. Here you have very big QR codes that you can scan, and you can see the report in the ANSEP and the Shiny app. I'm going to explain a little bit some results, but there's loads of results that we produce. So all can be accessed in the Shiny app. So in this study, basically, we were interested in valproic acid, that is a treatment mostly for epilepsy, but it's also a second-line treatment for bipolar disorder and migraine. And it's a known teratogen. That means that if taken by pregnant women, it could lead to malformations in the child. And the EMA had issued risk minimization measures in 2014 and 2018 to try to decrease the use of this medicine in women of childbearing age. So for this study, we have two different types of study, two very clear objectives. The first one was to look at prevalence and incidence of the drug in women of childbearing age that we define 12 to 55 years old. And the second study is to understand how these women look, what are their comorbidities and indication and all these things. So for this study, we had 5 data partners, 6 data partners, sorry, that you can see here from the UK, Belgium, Spain, Finland, the Netherlands, and Germany. And basically, our drug of interest was valproic acid and all substances containing like some valproic acid. And we also look at alternative treatments. I'm not going to talk about the alternative treatments, but you can all see it in the Shiny app or in the report. And then we look at age, of course, indications, and then we did a large-scale patient characterization. As you see, this is from the standard types of study that we define in Darwin. This is 2 different types of study. One is population-level drug utilization study, that is incidence and prevalence. And then we have patient-level drug utilization study, that is the characteristics of the patients. And I think I'm going to be a little bit slower here because I think this is very important. At this stage, we were doing the first drug utilization study, and we kind of were building the tracks where we were driving the train and a little bit also building the train. But I want you to see that from the request to the report, it took 6 months with 2 holidays in the middle. And this was the first protocol we were writing for drug utilization studies in Darwin, so we had to write it from scratch, basically. It took 1 month, so now I think we can write protocols even faster because we have much more experience in writing protocols. And from the moment we had the protocol approved to a report, a very lengthy report with results, it took 2.5 months with winter holidays in the middle. So I think this was the first time we were quite fast doing this work, mostly thanks to all the data partners that responded really fast also. And yeah, just wanted to highlight that this is going to be, I think, even faster in the studies that we're doing now. So yeah, let's see results. So basically, quick results. The incidence decreased for all the databases that we studied in the period that we studied, the incidence of use of valproate, and basically older age groups were having higher use of this drug. That makes sense because we're trying to avoid this drug in women that want to have children. And here are the results. As you see, they are different. This is incidence rates. But as you see, what is more or less consistent for all databases is that there's a decrease of incidence, especially after 2000. It started before, but after 2014, there was a decrease in all databases, and then it stayed low in 2000. After 2019, that were more or less the points where the EMA issued these recommendations. Similar with prevalence, we're probably better at stop prescribing new drugs that in retiring these kinds of drugs that are usually taken chronically is quite difficult to deprescribe. But similar, which is similar after 2014, there's a decrease of the prevalence of use of valproate in women of childbearing age. And now to the patient level characterization. We see, of course, that everyone in this cohort were female, but as you see, we have quite a big number of patients taking these drugs. And here what we see is that these drugs, because of the indication and because also the whole, mostly because of the indication, that we have high levels of patients that also have anxiety or depressive disorder concomitant with it. But if you go to the Shiny app, you can search for your favorite comorbidity and see how these patients are. And then I think this got a little bit moved because I didn't want to highlight acid-related disorders. I wanted to highlight the hormonal contraceptive, that is this one here. But basically what we do with this, usually with these women, is recommend, if they're taking this drug, that they also take contraceptives. But as you can see here, like the numbers of people taking contraceptives are not especially high. And we think this is probably because we cannot see it in the data. So this is another thing that I think we need to think about, is the limitations of the data we have and be very knowledgeable of which kind of data are we working with. And then we saw that the initial dose, it's another thing we checked, was pretty constant over time for these patients. And then the cumulative dose was mostly constant, except in SIDIAP, that it started high and then it went down. So basically the conclusion for this study was that incidence and prevalence of use of valproate among women of childbearing age has declined in all the studied data sets, especially in younger women. So this is exactly what we were looking for, so that's good. And initial dose did not change over time. And I think the a key takeaway is the quick turnaround that we were able to work on this study. And I leave here, again, the QR code if you are interested and you want to see more of the study. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Albert. Next, I'm going to invite our second guinea pig, Johnmary, who was also leading one of the first and probably the largest study we've done to date, or at least the largest drug utilization study we've done to date. Johnmary, stage is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for having me. I'm delighted to present this results or brief summary of our study on drug utilization of antibiotics in the watch category of the WHO aware classification. Just the usual disclosure. Just a bit of perspective on the background. The WHO 2021 aware classification classified antibiotics based on their likelihood of resistance into 3 groups: the access, watch, and the reserve. The national target is usually set at 60% and above for the access antibiotics, and for the watch and the reserve, they are, because of the high potential for resistance, the use should be relatively low. So the watch list antibiotics include subclasses that have higher resistance potential and include most of those with the priority among the critically important antibiotics for human medicine. And so they should be prioritized for stewardship program and, of course, rigorous monitoring. So our goal for this study was to estimate the incidence and prevalence of use, as well as duration of use, and, of course, the indication of use. For the purpose of this presentation, the results is very exhaustive, but I would just limit presentation to the incidence of use and, of course, the duration of use. So you see, so for this study, we had 6 electronic healthcare records from 5 countries in Europe, of course, including the Netherlands, France, 2 databases from Spain, Germany, and, of course, the United Kingdom. And this, of course, cuts across both primary care and secondary care. And there are 2 secondary care databases in this study. So just a bit of insight on the methods. It's, of course, done at 2 levels, the population level and, of course, the patient level. For the population level, we looked at annual incidence, calculated as the number of new users after 30 years of no use per 100,000 person years of the population at risk of getting exposed during the calendar year. And, of course, for the patient level estimation, we looked at the duration of use, and if there are 2 drug errors that are merged into one, if the distance between them, the duration of use was less than 7 days. So they give a bit of insight on the results. The watch list, of course, antibiotics is very huge, and of course we have around 137 individual antibiotics at ingredient level included. So for us, we observed 78 out of the 133 antibiotics, and those are the ones that are mapped to the, of course, Omocom data model. Of this, in general, the use of these watch antibiotics we are relatively low, but of course there are some discernible pattern. As you can see in the table, you can observe that among the top 5 antibiotics used across databases, ciprofloxacin was among them. It was consistently used across all the healthcare databases, and this is, of course, regardless of the healthcare setting, which is very interesting. And, of course, if you focus more on the 2 secondary care databases, which is EMASIS and Chubis, you would see that among the top 5 also included ceftriaxone, which, of course, made it to the list. There are, of course, a number of other antibiotics that had a higher incidence of use, exceeding 1,000 per 100,000 patients, which, of course, included azithromycin, fosfomycin, of course, and the rest. Looking at the incidence of use over time, you could see that, of course, this is, of course, huge of course, study, which, of course, from high heterogeneity, you can, of course, estimate. You would see there are differences across databases and, of course, with ingredients. For ciprofloxacin, you would see that compared to other databases, the use in France, Chubis database was relatively low compared to other databases. But overall, you could see a discernible trend of decreasing or stabilizing trend in the use over time. For ceftriaxone, there is, of course, increasing trend in use over time, particularly in the 2 secondary care databases. For the duration of use, sorry for the heavy table, but just to give you an overview, for most of the, in general, the use in secondary care was, of course, much shorter. The duration of use in secondary care was much shorter compared to those used in primary care. And of course, it's interesting to notice that for fosfomycin, which is usually prescribed usually for a duration of a day, was very compliant and, of course, consistent across databases, of course, with a slight difference in SIDIAP. So, of course, like I said initially, that this study is very exhaustive. We have a lot of results, but I'll just highlight some of them. What we found that the incidence of use of these antibiotics was relatively low, with the exception of some antibiotics like ciprofloxacin, clarithromycin, fosfomycin, and azithromycin. And of course, the incidence of use remained generally stable or decreased over time, with the exception of a few antibiotics like ceftriaxone, which were used mainly in secondary care. And for the majority of the antibiotics, there were some increase, of course, with, in incidence with age, and of course, some sex-specific differences. Overall, the median of duration of use was, of course, lower in secondary care compared to primary care, with an average of around a day in secondary care, and of course, duration of use of 1 week in primary care databases. Thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Johnmary. We now have time. I started with a very harsh order to it, not to go for more than 10 minutes, because I really wanted to have time for Q&A and discussion. I'm going to invite a few people to come to the stage for this Q&A session. Peter Reinbeck. Is he around? Otherwise, I guess he doesn't need an introduction. I'm going to call also Katia, please, Talita, Annika, and Andre, please, to join me. I could do with someone to help me with this, because I tried before and I think I injured someone. I need Patrick. Where is Patrick? Arinze, are you good at this? No. Let's see. You are. Okay. While Peter is coming up, there's 2 people in the panel that didn't speak in this last session. One of them is Peter, which I don't think I need to introduce to you. But the other one is Annika. Maybe I can start, Annika, by asking you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Annika Utica. I'm a senior researcher at the Oxford University, and I'm leading the pharmacoepidemiology sub-team in Danny's group.
Cool. Questions? I don't think you'll have the luxury of asking questions in real time to this panel very often, so... Any questions, anyone?
There's a question there.
I don't see it. Oh, up there.
Oh, no.
Arinze, come on.
Ooh. How many times are we going to try this?
There you go.
Thank you. Hello. So I got the sense that the IRB approval is one of the time-consuming steps. Is that correct? Oh, Talita, she's nodding. Okay, so in the United States, in the Sentinel program, they got like a legal, judgment that because the analysis were being done for public health use to execute the mandatory mission of the FDA, then they were exempt from IRB because it wasn't research. I guess I'm just curious whether from EMA thinks it's a possibility of getting some similar thing in the EU. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. I think I'm going to ask a few people to answer this question because it's one that worries us quite a bit, I think, right? So we need to get to a point where we can get these approvals faster. Maybe Annika, I can ask you to talk about the blanket approvals that we are trying with CPRD in the UK, and then Talita to tell us also a little bit about your experience. Let's start with that, and then Andre, maybe you'll dodge the bullet this time.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah, I think for CPRD in the UK, we tried a new approach. We asked for a blanket approval for drug utilization studies and rare disease studies, which allowed us to explain why we do it, what the EMA asked for, and then add each of the individual studies that EMA requests as an amendment. And we have the experience that this speeds up the process quite a bit. However, we still have like a month time waiting from submission of the request to the approval. So I think we could like narrow down it to half of the time. But obviously, since it's patient data, we need IRB approval from the scientific board of CPRD.
Talita, you want to tell us a little bit about your
so in the
experience?
case of SIDIAP, we've tried to do exactly the same thing, but it didn't work. At first they said yes, but then no, and then yes, then no. Then right now we are submitting each protocol one by one, as we used to do before. The good thing is because they know it's for Darwin, I can submit a protocol the day before their meeting, so they meet once a month, and they would accept that. So that's been good. But maybe from EMA, if there was something that could be done to try to push this in the institutions, that would be great.
Yes, Andre, I don't think I can save you anymore now.
Well, I'm not sure I've got quite the golden bullet there, but from the position of the EMA, I don't think we have any exemptions for such analysis. So we certainly comply with the institutional processes, and we wouldn't look to modify them or in any way push. We will certainly do anything we can to support the information, so the flow, to explain why the studies. And I think one of the possible solutions is to go for the broad approvals for a particular use case, which can then accelerate the conduct of future studies. But we'd certainly not go and bypass any of the processes.
Peter, I think you want to add something?
Yeah, well, it might also be interesting to explore what comes out of the European health data space and how that's going to help out with pushing some of these governance boards into the same direction. It would actually be quite helpful if they would all use the same type of processes and platforms and procedures. Especially if there are some thoughts about data permit authorities on national level. So maybe that could move this space a bit, because it's really a pity that there's a loss in time because of this procedure and not so much about running the study.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, Cynthia, and I think you heard there that, of course, in Europe you can have heterogeneous interpretation of the law and by the ethical committees. I think also on top of everything that's been said, what's really important is to highlight the fact that for each of the shelf studies, we're going to be using exactly the same analysis every single time, right? So if I was sitting in an ethics committee and I received 10 protocols, each one looking exactly the same, only changing the name of the drug, I would feel a bit silly having to do the same process 10 times. So I'm hoping that also, I know the team we have in the coordination center is going to be very stubborn and persistent and persevering with this. So it might be that, for those ethics committees that are not taking this on the first time, they might do by repetition. So when they see that indeed we are insisting all the time with the same analytics, it doesn't make too much sense to have to review the whole thing every time, right? That's an advantage that I'm hoping we can build from. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Any other question? I really want to test Cynthia's capacity to throw that thing from there. Michelle was unimpressed there.
Are you good, Michelle?
Christian, maybe next time you have to be standing in a spot instead of moving around the pitch.
I didn't even know the referee already used the whistle. So.
Christian.
Question. So on year 4 and 5, you're going to do a whopping 144 studies. That's more than any other regulatory agency. Actually, that's more than all other regulatory agencies in the world together are performing. So quite two questions, two half questions. One is to the team, what do you think is the biggest impediments for scaling up to that, apart from the IRB, we have heard about that one. And then to André, do you actually have that many questions? And do you have people who can properly state them? Thanks.
André, can I ask you to start?
Well, yes, this is the foreseen capacity, which we've estimated up front, and certainly, for the point of executing the network, we need a certain level of planning, because then we need to also commit the necessary funds. So it's what we see as the maximum capacity we can deliver. So when you think about it, I've mentioned the use cases with the names of the committees. We have 6 committees plus the the scientific advice working party. So that's 7. If we get a research request every month from each of them, that's already nearly 100 requests. Okay. And we're looking at also proactively pre-generating some of the evidence for the new medicinal products where we know will be coming next year for authorization, looking at the disease epidemiology, looking maybe at the standards of care. So we think we can fill it up. So far, we've seen very much the foreseen capacity for this year fill up quite quickly. So watch this space and keep fingers crossed.
Does anybody else want to answer the first question, which was about barriers to scaling up? The reason I'm standing here is that I don't want to answer questions.
No, I can give it a go. Well, I think that there are multiple. One of the most interesting ones, actually, for me, is more like the change management of the whole ecosystem, and that means us and EMA together, trying to figure out how we can make the scalability realistic and possible. And that means that we need to align a lot on what we actually mean with certain analysis, how we implement them, how we standardize them. And that requires alignment also on your side, I think, on the EMA side, with all the different committees and different members. And we, of course, cannot reinvent the wheel if we want to scale up to this number of studies. So this is definitely one of the important things. If we can get there, that would be extremely nice. And I actually personally really like that very high level of ambition in Darwin, because it really puts us really on our top of our toes to get this done, and I think it's great to get there.
And perhaps to add on, if you saw the example of Albert, how fast we did it already for the valproate study, so hopefully it's going to increase further.
Yeah, maybe one thing to add, what would also be very nice if we would be more proactive in generating evidence than responsive to questions from EMA. So why do we actually not already know the incidence rates of the top whatever disease is now? Why do we have to wait for a question to come in to give that answer? And I think there is room for us to think about that option of pre-calculating things, at least for the off-the-shelf studies, much earlier, and therefore it's just a matter of looking up the question instead of generating the evidence on the fly, which I think is a very interesting topic to look into. Not now, but later I think it would be very nice.
Thank you, Peter. Any other? Talita, you want to add something?
Yeah, from more a data partner perspective, I think for us, the infrastructure could be an issue, so we're not sure. Now we're running maybe 10, 15 studies in a year. Are we going to be able to run 15 at the same time with the infrastructure that we have? We don't know. And then also the human capacity. So we are a big but still small community, and there are not that many people around who can perform this kind of studies with the common data model. So for us internally, having a bigger team would be ideal, but then also the resources that we're getting to be there are not, I would say, enough perhaps to hire more people. So we'll see what happens when we scale up, and to answer the question, Christian.
It's fine, you have like 6 months to do that. Any other questions?
So I kind of have a questions along the same lines of Christian, but I think when we talk about scaling, I'm curious how the feasibility will scale, because I would assume the feasibility questions would potentially increase at an exponential level compared to the 140 so studies that would end up being run. So maybe could you speak a little bit about that process, how it's working now, and perhaps how you envision that in the future?
That's a fantastic question, Claire. Katia, I'm afraid that's one for you.
So the way we assess feasibility now, we get a request from the EMA, and the first thing that we do is we check within the Darwin portal about what of the 10 database partners that we have now, what are the numbers? Do we have people with the incident, with the disease of interest, and do we have people being exposed to the drug of interest. And I think the way we assess feasibility has improved a lot as well, thanks to the efforts of Maxime and his team, the way the Darwin portal has been set up. We learned also by doing, for instance, for EMA, it's interesting to have numbers in specific age categories. So a lot of questions came from the pediatric committee, and they would like to have numbers in children, for instance. So we are working on that as well. So I think we improved a lot in doing the feasibility assessment. We have a good procedure on how we do feasibility assessments. And we try not having to go to the database partners if possible, because if that's needed, they have to run a code. So we try to be as lean as possible in assessing the feasibility assessment, trying to get it from the Darwin portal and informing data partners, but not necessarily asking them to run a code. So I think we improved a lot in that assessment.
I agree, and so that's an example of pre-calculating things. So we actually have the record counts of all the diseases and drugs in their databases, which is very useful. And that would actually allow a tool that you are working on, like the data diagnostic tool, to also be run in this setting. Where you can actually more easily look at which databases have both BMI, have diabetes patients, and have this drug. It's all univariate, so it counts, or record counts. Next step can then be to really send around a more complex cohort definition with more multivariate analysis, which we can do in the second step, but we definitely do not want to do that for all feasibility questions against all databases, maybe at some point 40 or more databases, because they will be overloaded with feasibility questions. So we need to be a bit smarter than that and to be more proactive as well.
Excellent. There's a question over there. Claire, are you there to...
Yeah, I don't want to...
Or maybe you can pass it to Michel, and then he'll do the rest.
Like, can we do like a... Yeah, there we go.
Community effort.
Hi, I would like to know more about European health data space and the adoption of OMOP into European health database.
The question, I think, was the adoption of OMOP in the EHDS, in the European health data space. I think Peter and Andre might be the best positioned people to answer this.
Yeah, so I've been involved in the TEDOS project, and OMOP has been discussed there, and there are some ongoing discussions, I think, still, as always. What's very nice is that the use case that we are doing within the EU for Health, which is kind of the selected program to run some pilot studies within the EHDS, is building on a study that we have executed earlier, actually within a framework contract of EMA in COVID, that was executed on the OMCOM data model. So we are testing out for European health data space how that would work if database would be on OMOP. And as Andre explained, there's also some databases that are not on OMOP, maybe yet, they may move. And we can see what that actually, how that impacts the timelines of the study. Right, and if we, in the conclusion is that the timelines are really jeopardized because we have to deal with all these databases that are not in the CDM, that would actually be a good thing in that sense, because it would make a strong point why the way we act in Darwin is a good way forward. I know that, and I was really happy to see in those status meetings that it's definitely not us pushing only for OMOP. There were many other organizations in those meetings that brought up OMOP as a solution. So I think it's still open for discussion, but definitely of interest to many people.
Teresa wants to keep the microphone for herself.
Yeah, I already captured. I was interested in the onboarding process of data partners. Do you only look at what the data inherits or data quality, or like maybe what Talita touched about, what the resources are on the data partner side, like the human resources?
Yeah, it's all of that.
Okay.
So it's a combination, and that's quite nice because we have, if they are already on the CDM, we can run standardized tools against their data to understand some quality issues and run data quality dashboard, for example, as part of the onboarding process. But you're right, there are also aspects to onboarding that are not related to the data only, but also resources or governance procedures. So there's also always a questionnaire that data partners have to fill in, where we try to understand as much as possible upfront. But then also there's the opportunity to have a call. It's sometimes better to talk to the people than just look at a questionnaire. So that's also something that we do, and in the actual onboarding process, we always have a call with each data partner from the coordination center to also understand their resources and how we can really make a success out of that.
Do they commit to a certain amount of studies, or could it be that they would be never asked, or maybe every time?
Yeah, so very good question. That is an unknown, and that's also unknown, I think, to EMA itself, because the questions come from the committees. So yeah, we cannot guarantee an X number of studies. But we do assume that they would like and will participate in studies that we ask them to do. But because there's a governance procedure step, there's also a way out. If the governance board doesn't allow to run the study, of course, we cannot push for that. But we try to get them in most studies as possible. But there's no obligation in that sense. Yeah.
Thank you. We're running out of time. We only have 5 minutes. And I know there's the closure waiting for us. Somebody approached me earlier and said that they were assuming there would be some live music, and they assumed that I would be playing guitar, which I hope is not the case. Anything.
You don't read your emails.
Otherwise, I'll keep asking you questions so that we don't do the closure. I think there's a question from Asia over there.
I'm going to run over this. Okay. I honestly don't know who this question is for, but I was just thinking and follow up to what Teresa said. So Andrea, you showed that there are, I forgot the proportion, but there are a good number of questions that were deemed unfeasible because of data problem. And I assume that as we're recruiting more data partners, that's going to be less of an issue for Darwin, but at the same time, you're getting more complex questions, more complex diseases, and different treatment strategies. I'm just curious to see if there is any thought about like enabling other potential new data partners that might want to join later on with that data element that has been anticipated or thought of in Darwin. What are you going to do with that?
No, yes, indeed. And the non-feasible studies you refer to are the kind of last 18 months, very much pre-DARWIN EU, when we couldn't do studies via DARWIN EU. And so one of the learnings we take from that is what could help us overcome that. So certainly the influencing the next selection of data partners would be one of the uses of that information. So certainly where we see we can't do some analysis, some use cases, then that's exactly where we would like to move. For example, have we got sufficient number of cancer registries if we know that the next product portfolio will be heavily skewed towards cancer medicines? So informing the choice of data partners, yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Anything else from the panel? Otherwise, I'll ask probably for our last question. We have like 3 minutes. Michelle?
Should I try?
Asia, stick to research.
So
You're never going to play for the New York Knicks.
Well, it's along the same lines actually on the data partners. To what extent or how do you evaluate actually representativeness across certain demographic population, the healthcare setting and so on?
Shall I start and then maybe?
Yeah, please.
So there's one stage we look at representativeness is at the point of onboarding. For example, we've seen one of the population pyramids, I think it was in Talita's presentation, what's the composition of the source versus the national characteristics of the population, which is, I think, a good start. We then also do the consideration on what are the proposed data partners in each study and how this helps us to answer the research question. And you may have seen in the antibiotics, we had some primary care, some secondary care, so to at least have an insight into the results. Now, we don't necessarily already strive for having 27 member states in each healthcare setting. That's probably not feasible. But to inform the policy, we might be able to do that. And there are some research questions where, of course, the right type of source for an association between an exposure and outcome, you want the right population, but not necessarily you don't need it from all sources of healthcare.
Thank you so much, Andre. I think on that note, we're going to close with a big round of applause for my panelists, the speakers, and the whole of the community.